American children are the most stressed out children in the world.
Right.
And you're going to hear my voice like be very insistent on this because I just love kids so much. My own kids, I'm a teacher. I've just taught hundreds of kids throughout the years. I just love kids, and it makes me so crazy that the adults, that our culture, that even well-meaning people are stressing out an entire generation of children unnecessarily.
Family, all in this together. Family, we're taking a chance. Family, like birds of a feather.
Hey, thanks for joining us on today's podcast. This is going to be an exciting, I think, and very pertinent and relevant topic.
It's something that people ask us about a lot. They say, how do you do it all?
And it's a plague, or it's a challenge. It's a struggle.
Plague may be a strong word, but it can be. Right. No, in some communities, though. Well, okay. In some communities, it can be.
Yeah, not for you, listener, but in our world. Okay. Yeah. Dear listener, who says that? But there is something in our world today that we feel as parents a burden or an expectation that we have to make sure that our kids are performing at this level.
High performing kids is our main job as parents.
It's ingrained into us, right? Because there aren't expectations for all these other areas. I think it's ingrained by
our culture, not by nature.
And there is some beauty to that. And there's some goodness in wanting to be excellent or what have you, for sure.
And wanting to help your kids develop their gifts and be the best that they can be.
But there can be a stress and a burden that's added to us, another weight that's added upon us. Because parents already feel the pinch of not being adequate or not up to speed. But what we've got is we've got an opportunity to say, how much should our kids actually be involved with? How many things?
How many activities should they be involved in?
And is it, when's too much? Too much. When is, because we always feel shuttled and moving our kids around.
And you know what? And it occurred to me that because so many kids are involved in so many activities, this is why, like when you drive through neighborhoods in like the 1960s and even 70s, there were kids playing outside all the time.
And even 80s. What do you mean?
Yeah, because it was unstructured time.
Yeah.
But now there's no kids playing outside, or fewer kids, hardly any kids playing outside. Why? Because those kids are so busy with activities.
Yeah.
Is that right and good? I really think that that's contributing kind of to the breakdown of our neighborhoods and even like civic societies, because then if I'm busy driving my kids playing, sitting at every practice and every game, I have less time to be involved in my community, to be involved in civic societies, to be involved in volunteering for my church or my school, because I'm with my kid, and then my kid has less time as well. So there's something wrong here that we want to kind of call out and have people start to reconsider. Yeah.
So we want to be able to kind of play out, what is the right kind of activity level for our kids? We'll go through different kind of age appropriate or levels or phases of development, right? Talk about what's appropriate, what's needed, how to avoid, what is it? Is it the tiger mom, or is it the dance mom? The dance mom, right? The trap that's out there. How do we really avoid becoming too busy as parents as well as for our kids, when your kids maybe should consider quitting a sport and when to stick it out.
So these are all things we're going to talk about on the podcast today.
That's right. All right.
But before we do that.
That's right. Before we get into today's topic, I just want to personally, we want to personally just thank you for those who were able to step up and support us. We only do 2 different campaigns, if you will, for financial support for this nonprofit work. Every donation is tax deductible on your income taxes, but it is a massive help to us. That's how we exist. That's how we are able to do the work, not only of this podcast, but all the free resources, the opportunities that we do both in person and online, and you guys have stepped up. Like, this was a big deal for us, and it has been. We're in our 6th year as a nonprofit organization, and we are only here because of you, because of your support. And we'll take your donations at any time. So feel free if you missed out. You haven't missed the boat.
But we've shipped out lots of gifts and things for those people who have given. And so we're so grateful for that. And just to continue, even if you can't financially support us, please continue to pray for us. and give us those reviews on iTunes and Spotify and all of that, because our ranking is definitely going up. So we're in the top 100 of all parenting podcasts. Hey, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep raising that ranking. That would be amazing, because I think that the message that we have to give of encouragement and empowerment of parents is so, so important in this world. And that is happening because of you guys.
And if you are a monthly supporter, you give every month $25 or more, I want to make sure you don't forget, we have the Messy Family Neighborhood, a community of like-minded parents that are here to support each other, to encourage each other, to give us help on our path, on our own individual journey. We have special date nights like we had Chris and Natalie Stefanik. We have upcoming Art and Lorraine Bennett talking about the temperaments. If you're not familiar, the temperaments God gave you, the temperaments God gave your child. They're the authors of this, have some great insight.
Temperamentquiz.com. We refer to that a lot.
Yeah.
They're the ones that do all of that. So we're so excited.
And in addition to those kind of virtual date nights and interaction we have on that, we also have special times where Alicia's setting aside time for moms, kind of in a mom circle, supporting each other as they get together. And I do kind of a little bit of a dad lab where we sit down and talk about being fathers and
not physically on Zoom, but
yeah.
But you are sitting.
I am sitting when I'm on Zoom. And anyway, but then other resources as well as those who are members, you get discounts on all our courses.
Hey, we take care of our members.
We
do.
Really, you've poured into us and we want to pour into you. We want to thank you on that way. So again, thanks for all your support, and let's dive into today's topic.
Okay. So let's first talk about why do parents even consider putting their kids in different activities? Why? Because
I have trouble drinking. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Nobody
I have a
noticed.
drinking
Don't
problem.
worry.
But I'm Irish. Everyone expects that. That's all right. Sorry. You all right. So
okay. No. Why do people even consider? I have to get back on my train of thought here. Why do people even consider formal activities? Because they want their kids to play, because they want their kids to play. And that is a good desire, but I think they're trying to get their kids to play in the wrong context, okay? Kids under the age of 6, actually all kids under 18, learn through play.
Yeah.
They learn through play, but what parents need to understand is that the greatest learning through play happens without adults being present. And when I say learning, I mean social learning, emotional learning, even skills-based learning happens without adults. Guys, we're not as important as we think we are sometimes, I think, in that role.
Yeah.
So we want to start by just talking about the importance of play. So even in academic learning, even in school, we have to recognize that things like learning how to read, learning how to do math, learning history, science, all of those things, absolutely, academic learning is extremely important. But the main lessons that children under the age, especially under the age of 6, the main lessons they are learning at that time is not those academic learnings.
Yeah.
It is social, emotional development that happens. And we have to recognize that happens through play.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of parents, again, we kind of talked about this in the very beginning, but they have this false expectation from the culture that we live in that our job is to produce high performing kids.
Yeah.
And we care about our kids. I hope you do. And we want the best for them. And we want better and more opportunities. We want them to be smarter, stronger, faster, whatever. And those expectations need to be translated into what's actually good for the child, not just what feels right or what the culture is necessarily telling us. And so when you talk about this idea of recognizing that the formal sports and activities that is often proposed, it doesn't always actually meet the mark. It doesn't accomplish what you think it is going to accomplish. And what is really at the heart of this is this desire that we are creating in this culture, anxiety and stress and burden, and it's not actually fulfilling the real goal, which is the formation of our kids and giving them what they actually need, which is more oriented towards play.
I think that everybody, if you're watching the news, like the Surgeon General has been coming out with warnings about
huge.
social media and all of that. But putting that aside for a moment, shout out to our last couple podcasts on tech. And that was before the Surgeon General came out. So we were already like on that train. But the reality is that the reason that people are talking about this is because American children are the most stressed out children in the world.
Right.
And you're going to hear my voice like be very insistent on this because I just love kids so much. My own kids, I'm a teacher. I've just taught hundreds of kids throughout the years. I just love kids, and it makes me so crazy that the adults, that our culture, that even well-meaning people are stressing out an entire generation of children unnecessarily.
Right.
All right. So let me just talk for 1 second about play. When we say play, what is play? Okay. So I have this definition from this researcher, a play researcher, Dr. Peter Gray, and he's from Boston College, and he has this definition. Play are activities that are freely chosen and directed by the participants and undertaken for their own sake, not to achieve something.
It's a good unto itself.
It's a good, or as Maria Montessori would say, work, she would call play the work of the child.
Right.
But the work is the job of the child, or a child works to construct themselves.
Right.
They do not they do not wash a dish
To accomplish some task
to make the
necessarily.
dish clean, right? They are not building a tower of blocks to actually make a tower. They're doing it because they're constructing themselves.
Yeah.
So the play is the work of the child.
And I think that if we kind of just put ourselves back in that mode, because for a lot of us, we may have skipped over. We may have missed some of that in our own childhood. Forced to grow up too fast is a common phrase, right?
The younger parents who are listening, yeah,
and
not old parents like us.
Yeah, but even depending on your household, where you grew up, when you kind of skipped over some things that you should have been given.
Unstructured time, you mean?
Yeah, just the play. Like that's what is often overlooked, is that we weren't given the time to just be a kid.
Right.
And to be a kid means you can just enjoy life. You can play. You can have that. And really, for us as adults, we still need play. We still learn through play. But there's something very poignant and very powerful about the formation that happens in our child's hearts with play, as opposed to them being forced to go out and work in the coal mines, or them to go out and,
Yeah, that was the problem with children in the past.
That's right.
Is that they were being forced to act like adults too quickly. But now we're kind of, if you think about it, we're still forcing kids to act like adult too quickly, but in a different way, in these structured teams, in these highly competitive leagues and things like that.
And what happens in there's a again, what is liberalism it goes against the stated intent. Like, meaning if their desire
liberalism achieves the opposite of its stated intent.
Right. And the idea being that we all want to form our kids, but by putting them into a structured bubble that has a quote unquote specific outcome
created by quote experts.
Again, we're not talking about all. We're going to
get through the different stages of kids.
But when you have the ability to have the freedom for play, there is exploration, there's creativity, there's explosion, there's all these good things that come as part of this. Because when you are at play by yourself, and I'll just speak as a former child myself, as a boy particularly,
as a former boy.
In order for play to be enjoyable, and I think formative, there has to be some level of risk involved.
Give an example of something that your mom allowed you to do because she didn't know what was happening.
Yes, well, there's probably some stupid risks involved, but like
that's okay. There's not kids listening. These are all parents.
All right, these are all parents. Okay, so we're in the family, right? Okay, just keep this between us, right? But like I'd play with a knife, okay, and I was 10 plus years old, and I sliced into my finger. Okay. The risk was high in playing with a knife with an unexperienced, unsupervised child. I was still in my parents' home or backyard.
But tell them what happened.
And I, as a very mature, wise 10-year-old, decided I could take care of it myself. And so I was very into Army stuff. And so I had a little med kit And
You're like, perfect time for
I'm
me
like,
to
I can
practice
do
my
this.
medical skills.
I had probably more confidence than I should have at that point.
That's your MO in
That's
general.
right. And thanks very much. And but I grabbed my med kit and went into the bathroom. What I didn't realize,
There's a mom's knocking on the door.
my mom is knocking on the door and she says, "Michael, are you okay?" And I said, yeah, I'm fine. She's like, "Michael, I'm going out. I just want to know." And then I said, "Mom, I'm fine. And she says, "Michael, there is a trail of blood leading to the bathroom. Open the door now." Now, my mom was a nurse. Actually, I needed stitches because of the cut. So please forgive me for being stupid. But that risk.
But you learned.
Not only did I learn, I had fun before it. I had enjoyment. I had a sense of individual agency and power. And then I realized, small risks, small consequences, right?
See, that's the other element of play that's really important, is that the risks, there is a sense of physical risk, but the consequences aren't so great. Because let me give an example.
Yeah.
Using the whole knife example, right? You were 10 years old. You were in a home. You were at home. Your mom was there. You learned.
Right.
What if you were never, ever allowed to play with knives, and then you're a young adult in the middle of the woods with friends, you never used a knife before, you slice your hand in the same way because you didn't learn when you were little.
That's right.
Right? And then you are in big trouble because you're in the middle of the woods somewhere, not able to take care of, what needed to be taken care of. So the consequences were less when you're allowed to play with those things within your own home.
And kids do learn powerful lessons by the trial and error, right? But what we want is to be in a unsupervised, but still within our
Boundaries.
sphere of control, right?
Yes.
Our safety, our safe bounds, right? And so as parents, nobody wants our kids to get hurt. That's a natural human desire. However, in these little things,
Allowing them to take
the risks,
Right.
Even particularly when the cost, there is a cost, but the cost is small. We need freedom. Now, I don't think my mom looked and said, "Boy, this is a great learning experience." But I look back
She may have said, "Michael, this is a good learning experience. Be careful next time."
I don't recall that.
But I think that's
I'm
probably,
saying
that's the attitude of a normal parent.
But I do believe, I know I learned something powerful in that time. And so I think we need to give enough freedom, enough space, enough unsupervised play so as to allow our kids to become, grow in their independence, grow in their, again, we'll talk about the age appropriateness, but if it doesn't have some level of cost or risk involved and being unsupervised, because that's really what it is, we're not really preparing them for the world. And again, this was shout out to previous podcasts, right? It's not about us. Was it Father Mike who said that, right? It's not about us preparing the world for our kids. It's about preparing our kids for the world.
Right.
And in the small ways, that's what this play does. Experience is how our kids learn. It's not just by information. We can't just give them a book. There are some powerful books of literature, particularly that can captivate the imagination, which are great formative tools. But at the end of the day, it's not mere information. Hey, you're not allowed to play with this. Really? Why? I need to know. Our kids need to experience it. And that experience gives them a proper understanding of the world that they operate in. It gives them kind of an emotional connection that I think is really key, because our kids' brains are being formed by the experiences. They are that sponge in many ways, absorbing what's going on and how they're experiencing it, rather than simply a lecture.
So, and kind of like to that end about experience teaching them.
Yes.
And this is not just in physical things, but this is in social things as well.
Right.
You can put up in any classroom, in any, playground or whatever, be nice, be kind, share, treat others. You can write anything that you want. Let's be honest, guys. That's not really teaching kids anything. You know what's teaching kids? Teaching kids is when they're in that situation, when there's a bunch of 5-year-olds playing and someone keeps taking stuff from the other 5-year-olds, the other kids, they're just not going to play with them.
Right.
They're not, kids can, and I'm not saying that it should be like Lord of the Flies, just let the kids out there, whatever. But there is something about kids having experiences and learning together and learning how to react. Let me just tell you, there was this cutest video that I saw on Instagram, and it was a bunch of 4-year-olds playing soccer.
Okay.
And this one and two, they're on two little kids, a little boy, a little girl on opposite teams. And the little girl has the ball, of course, and she's like toddling along, kicking it. And the little boy comes and knocks her over. And then the play goes on. But the parent, obviously, that's their little girl. The little boy, he like helps her up and like looks at her and gives her a hug, and kiss and like leans down, like kisses her on the cheek. And it's like the cutest thing you've ever seen. But that's teaching. See, that little boy is actually teaching that little girl because he probably... He learned that from his parents, he learned that whatever, but he's able to practice that. And that little girl is learning, hey, this is what you do when somebody gets hurt.
That's right.
And now, of course, that is an example from a structured play. But my point is that situation is teaching those kids probably more than the parents just saying, hey, be kind, do this, da 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 da,
Yeah.
But they're teaching each other. And that happens because they were not obeying the rules. You're not supposed to stop and kiss your teammate when you knock them over. That's not how you play soccer. That's not part of soccer. That's not the rules. But that's what those kids needed. Yeah. And they could have done that if they were just playing together in a field somewhere.
And so let's go into some of the age groups. Okay.
Yeah.
So thinking of your young child, right? That 0, or I don't know what they call it, but 0 to 6, right? And so again, a lot of development is going on. A lot of explosions, if you will, are happening in their developmental life. We think about this as, again, for a boy, this is boyhood. This is girlhood. There's something very distinct about this time. And they do not need any sort of rigorous, structured sports activities. They really just need a good bit of safe freedom. Meaning safe is that you don't, again, think of the swimming analogy that we use a lot. It's like when your kids are young, you keep them within arm's length, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen. If you're in an unknown environment, they're close to you. That doesn't mean that you're like holding, like an infant, you might be holding, but then you slowly let them out. They're around water. You're never allowing them to be in the pool by themselves, but can they play without you having to intervene? Yes, they should. Yeah. And give them water, or again, thinking of the swimming thing, right? But then when they're out there, you're slowly training them and allowing them that freedom to grow and to expand. And when you think of this from a community standpoint, your kids need you. Was it Maria Montessori who said that the idea of God for a 0 to 6 is there's no separation between their understanding of the love of God and the love of mom and dad.
That's right.
And it's because mom and dad and the family form their universe.
Right.
That's what's probably key in this time.
That's what children need at this age, is that they need strong family bonds more than anything else.
Right.
And they need unstructured playtime. Now, I know that like our kids, they started playing soccer when they were like, 4, 5, 6 years old. But honestly, and the reason I bring that up is that if your family is totally at peace, you have tons of time, your marriage is strong, you feel like you have great relationships with your kids, you're not stressed out, go ahead, put your kids in soccer.
There's no problem with that.
But there's it's not like an evil, or anything like that. But if there is any stress that is brought into your life or the life of your children because of the activities of your child under 6, please just stop. Please, I beg of you. It's so unnecessary, and it is not worth introducing any iota of stress. Right. What's the best thing you could do? You want your kids to play soccer? Offer to have a bunch of little kids over your house, maybe have 2 or 3 other 5-year-olds, throw a soccer ball out there and set up a goal and say, go ahead and play soccer. Yeah. And guess what? If they don't want to play soccer, they don't have to play. Yeah. If they want to just like mess around and then do nothing, great. Like have 2 or 3 kids over, maybe when they're like 5 or 6. Right. But even a 4-year-old, like we had somebody on our neighborhood ask us questions about like, does my 3-year-old even need to be with other kids? Because it seems that other kids are like always knocking her down and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, not worth it. Not worth it.
And I think it's important for parents to hear this. Your child needs you.
Yeah.
0 to 6, your child needs you. Your family unit, that's what they need developmentally. And there isn't a heck of a lot else that is needed.
And
if
I
it
think
serves you and your family that they're out playing with in some kind of structured thing, that's fine. But remember, this is just about play.
Yeah.
This is a pure play without any structure, without any stress, without really any adult supervision. If you've ever seen little kids play, even a little bit older than 6, it's really just a blob.
Right.
Following the ball back and forth. And that's all it is. And
Then
that's
why
okay.
do that? Throw 5 balls in there. Let them all play. Let them all be kicking the ball around or whatever.
Right.
But you know what? The one thing is that, yes, they do need just their family. But I think the best social situation for young children is communities of families.
Yes.
If you are regularly,
and that's good for the family too.
It's good for the family too. If you are regularly getting together with 1 or 2 other families, that they learn, they know other adults, they know kids of different ages.
Yeah.
This is like the extended family unit. You know, people who are like almost like substitute aunts or uncles or grandparents or cousins. That is what children under 6 need.
Yeah.
And then, hey, when all of those families get together, you want to play a little soccer game because you want your kid to learn soccer? Great. Like, go for it. And guess what? They should be able to do whatever they want to do in the sense of whatever activity they are interested in, because that's how they are going to learn the best. The other thing is that kids under the age of 6 need an emotional connection to the teacher in order to learn something.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
They need an emotional connection to whoever's teaching them for them to learn. And so if they have an emotional connection to you, to someone they consider like, you know, Uncle Jimmy, you know, Uncle Isaac or whatever, and that person is teaching them, then they're going to learn. Yeah. If it's some random adult who is assigned as their coach who they don't know, who's like maybe a very nice person, but they're not really going to learn to them until they get that emotional connection.
Yes.
But then that person's going to be out of their life, you know? And so it's like,
Right.
it's one of those things.
Okay,
it's better,
but it's not.
It's better for them. If you want true learning to happen, you form an emotional connection with communities of families and you teach them within that context. That's when you optimize the amount of learning that happens.
And this is true. This next principle is true almost regardless of this stage of life. But they learn. What you're primarily trying to do is create a love for this, as opposed like a love for
Yes.
learning, rather than
A love for soccer.
Yeah, a love for soccer, a
love
love
for
for
t-ball.
exercise, a love for getting out and playing with friends, being a part of teams, or
Yeah.
you're creating a foundation that will be built on later. Don't feel like sometimes we as parents think we have to build the whole structure today.
Oh God, no.
We're laying a foundation that will be built upon, right? We as parents need to have the long game. And that's why it's important to kind of get these, you know, we break it down to these 3 different areas basically. Or kind of stages of development. And it's important that they get this right, that they know that they can be okay having fun, that there's something joyful about this. And then they're more open, they're more curious, they're more interested, and tapping into that with that freedom and allow the child to go. You know, and again, that doesn't mean you still keep your safe boundaries that you have for your child, but you allow it to be unstructured play,
Right.
for them.
Within those boundaries. And so please, you know, hear us. We're not saying don't have any boundaries at all. You know, don't
right.
just throw a bunch of 5-year-olds and drop them off at the park and drive away. No, we're saying
That's right.
there's our safe boundaries. First, like when they're 6, that's like your backyard. But then we're going to the next stage.
Right.
You have your 6 to 12-year-olds. Okay, your 6 to 12-year-olds in the second plane of development, they do need socialization. They do need to learn how to be with other kids.
Right.
They don't need to learn how to be with the whole world, right? That comes later. They do need to learn. This is your community, your parish, your neighborhood. This is where they have to learn about those kinds of relationships. And this is when I think that it is a great time to begin to develop those gifts. So look at your kid and think, what do they like to do?
Yeah.
And what is the
start
giftedness of this
recognizing that your
child?
kids are different. Now, we have certain things that we put all our kids through, but you really like piano lessons or this or that. But this is where you do want to start being more attentive, and maybe you learned it earlier on, but then lean into, maybe they're really more drawn to X sport or activity.
Right. Maybe they're more of an artist, you know, than an athlete, or maybe they like theater more or whatever. But I think that this is the time to look at that and to see, okay, how can we put them in places where they're going to develop those skills? Right. Again, keep everything in context, please. One of the things, again, I think this age group is probably where parents start to stress out their kids with things like travel sports.
Well,
all right, I just want to talk about travel sports for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've talked about this, I feel like, on some other podcasts, but I think it's worth talking about again. When I meet parents who don't have time to go away for a weekend together, but they travel 10 weekends a year for their kid's soccer game, it makes me a little crazy.
There's something maybe a little bit disorder. And we're just going to challenge you, okay? Because we have had parents who've come to us who are feeling like, I don't know what to do with my daughter. She really seems like anxious. She seems this, that. And I said, well, let's just describe her calendar. Like describe what her day looks like. And they went through, well, they've got dance here. They've got gymnastics over here. Then they've got this piano, and then they've got this sports activity, and they got, and then we also have them a part of this thing at church. And
I'm like, how old is your daughter? And they're like, oh, she's 8. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I was just like,
maybe you should pick one activity that might actually bear fruit and just love on your daughter and let her have some freedom where she doesn't have to do. I said, how much of her day is just completely unstructured? Yeah. I mean, evaluate that. Look at, if your child's 6 to 12, again, I think all of us need some unstructured time in our days, period.
Sure. Yeah.
But in this age group, they don't need, they do need some instruction, right? This is the beginning of where instruction comes to play, right?
Absolutely.
But this isn't where you want heavily structured activities. You don't want their life heavily structured and scheduled out. Again, we get it. If you're two parents that are working and it's challenging, but make sure that if you're having your kid involved with some activities, make sure that it's loosely held. It's not like this rigorous, high competitive. And then going back to your travel sports, right? We've heard kind of horror stories might not be. There are people who probably can navigate that field, right? But in a 6 to 12-year-old, I want to just challenge you that I'm not sure this is the time for them to be considering that. Right? Yeah. There are times in their life where that actually might become more pertinent and valuable.
I've news for people. Pele did not play travel soccer.
That's correct.
Okay.
And actually, it's funny. I was thinking,
I would go look at some of the greatest soccer players in the world. Go look at their lives.
Look at almost any athlete. When I talk to, or when I've listened to interviews, when you ask their young life in this 6 to 12 range, they almost didn't play a formal sport.
Exactly.
They were athletic. They played, but they weren't necessarily formal. And then even later, and we'll get into that later, but oftentimes they're saying they're playing different sports rather than only specializing.
So that's the thing about the 6 to 12-year-old. And I actually had a pediatrician tell me this once. He said, one of the best things you can do for your boys right now is allow them to play lots of different types of sports to not specialize at that age, which is, I thought that was really wise, because kids also, they don't know what they like.
Right.
They don't know what they're good at. It's good for them to try out different things, to see, okay, where do I want to focus on more in the teenage years when I'm really developing those giftedness. But I think that giving kids too much pressure where the consequences are high.
Yes.
Like when you are 10 years old and your parents have gotten a hotel for you to go and play a game, and you're out on that field, that's a lot of pressure for you to try to win, for you to do your best. No 10-year-old should have that pressure. Yeah. I'm sorry. No 10-year-old should be on a big field, having 100 adults watching them performing in the middle of the field. All right, I want to give you an example. So for Christmas this past year, I gave my daughter Claire a gift.
Yes.
And the gift was dance lessons for the two of us.
For both.
Yes, I'm
Mom
a little crazy. I'm totally
Claire.
outing myself. The video is available for our top donors.
I will make it available. Put it up for bids.
So we went and we started taking lessons, and she was already in dance class. But then we started taking lessons in February, and we just had the recital in June.
Yes.
Our dance was 90 seconds long. Okay. And it took me, I'm going to talk about myself. It took me from February to June, a class every week to learn how to do a dance for 90 seconds. And to do it really well.
And you were amazing, let me just say.
And it was not a complicated dance. And I danced from the time I was little up until I was like 16. Okay. So I would consider myself when I was younger a dancer.
You still got it.
But my point is, it was so much harder than you think it is. It is. And then another instance, my daughter Claire, same daughter, played volleyball. And at the end of the volleyball season, we did a like parents versus kids game, So it's all these parents who have been sitting on the sidelines, watching these games against a bunch of sixth graders. And they beat us. We played 3 sets. We did beat them twice, but they beat us once, So when you're sitting there on the sidelines, recognize whether it's dance or an instrument or a sport, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. What kind of pressure are we putting on young kids to do something that I don't know if we would do ourselves? Yeah. So I think that we really, really have to think about that and step back, because a lot of times I think parents get pressured by their culture, by their community, by their school, by the people around them. Say, this is how to be a good parent. That you have to get your kids in these teams. You have to invest in these ways. And we just want to have you step back and think, and we don't say, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because was it stressful for me? There was a certain amount of stress, but it was a fun stress, Yeah. And also because I'm an adult, I know, like it's not that big of a deal. But I mean, we really had to work on it. And there was something really great and gratifying about that. But it makes me think about like that 8-year-old or 10-year-old. It's like, wow, this is hard. And if they love it, do it. Yeah. That's awesome. Support them in that. But it has to be a very, very stress-free environment.
Yeah, and when you think about another layer of community, right? If we go back to the early age, communities of families that are just having their kids play together is a beautiful thing. But there are too many of the activities that are out there that want you to be all in on their sport. Oh,
yes.
All in on their
Great
blank,
point.
right?
Yes.
If you're not part of the dance moms, you're not part of the community. If you're not the soccer moms that are at every single game, and again,
or the soccer family,
right? Whatever it is, right? And it's men and women, it's bums and downs. But there is something, again, there is a beauty to community, right? We all need community, and
meeting other people,
and where do some of our closest friends were because our kids were in some activity together, and there is something.
But that wasn't
good.
The only way we knew them.
Correct, but there is a level of goodness there. I don't want to say it's all bad. However, if that organization or that sport or that whatever sets an expectation that you don't really love your kids, or we expect all the parents to be at all the events. Wait a second. Time out. I have one child who I love very much. Do I need to be present at every one of their soccer games or whatever it might be in order to show that I love them? That is a false narrative that the world is trying to sell you. Don't buy it. Now, if you can be at a game, great. We have tried to make it such that our family shows up. Not for every single game, but that we bring the other kids in, that we're all present, right?
It's and
it's a community event. And that changes the dynamic.
Right.
But if there was a travel sport or a travel gym or travel, whatever it might be, and we're dragging our families or we're dividing our families, I want to challenge you to look at that and evaluate, is this breathing life into our marriage, into our family? Is it really helping our kids? Or like you said, is it adding more anxiety on top of things?
I'm just going to tell you guys from my own experience. I have more than once been pretty much, I don't want to say yelled at because it wasn't like a elevated voice, but kind of like corrected, I'll put in quotes, by coaches and instructors and all of that you're never around. You don't come in and hang out and and stay for this or for that during all of the practices and everything. And I have said to those people, yeah, you're right. I'm not doing that. And that is not, I do not have time for that. My child does not want me to do that. If you want me to do that, guess what? And I've literally said, I really do not care. And we need to stand up for our own mental health, for our other children. And I have said, this is my one child. I have other children. I do not have time to sit in a waiting room for their entire class. That is not going to happen. Now, of course, if I'm traveling, hours away or, whatever, 20 minutes away, it's not worth it for me to leave. That's different. But if I can drop them off and if I can have a carpool, if my child has to wait for me after class, that's just the way it is. So I think that we need to not be taken up by the tyranny of those expectations that society is making for us. You are not a bad parent if you do not go to your child's soccer practice. And those parents that do, I'm like, hey, God bless you. I would sit in the car and I would read, I would do work on my computer. I would do all of these things because I'm not there, to be quite frank. And this is going to sound like a jerk, but it's true. I'm not there to make these other soccer parents my best friends. I'm really not. I have best friends. I have friends. I have other people who I would like to spend more time with. And I have a parish community that I am invested in. Those people are my friends. My child is here because this is one activity in their life that they are a part of for 12 weeks.
Right.
And I'm happy to support and I'm happy to be nice to people and kind to people, but this is not my base of my social life.
And again, every parent, every parent needs community. We need to invest in that. And you need to find it someplace and you need to be intentional about it, not just happen to be in it, because are these the people sharing your values? Are they supporting, encouraging you? You might be an advocate for the gospel. You might be a source of support in that community. You discern that, but don't,
if you want to do it, praise God.
Don't do it just because there are false outside of you, external expectations that are being hoisted upon you. You can say no, that we don't play that game.
Okay. So now let's pivot a little bit to the teenagers, to that third plane of development, the 12 to 18-year-olds.
Right. We're in the teen years now.
Exactly. So here, you should probably make this a little closer. All right. So now with teens, I do have to say that I do feel pretty strongly that they do need outside activities.
Yes.
It's very important. Why? Because this is the time of life when they know who they are within the family.
Right.
They know who they are within their community. They know how to have social relationships. Now they're figuring out, who am I in the world?
In relationship to the world.
In relationship to the world. In relationship to people who are outside of our parish, who are outside of our
extended family,
who are outside of our close group of friends. So this is why participating on a team with kids that you don't know, this is a good thing.
Right.
And also, I think especially for boys, them getting comfortable and confident in their body, in their own skin, is so important. And actually, so for boys, I think that's important. And then also for girls, I think a lot of women in general are risk adverse, which is not a bad thing because we're more,
they survive longer.
Right. Yeah. Women do survive longer than men. But I think that one of the psychologists that we listen to, Dr. Leonard Sachs, he talks about dare training for girls.
That's right.
And about how girls also need to learn how to take appropriate risks.
That's right.
They also need to learn how to become strong in their body, and their motivations for being on a team are different than boys. But I think athletics for girls is also so incredibly valuable.
And just again, it's true for boys and girls, but there is something in the masculine DNA that requires activity and action. And I think the phrase, although I don't subscribe to it entirely, the idle mind is the devil's workshop. I mean, there's some truth in that, right? For sure. Mm-hmm. And
idle hands are the devil's workshop.
And thinking of boys, an idle boy, like, you want to tire them out. You want to have them expend it. It's good for them. I remember being times when I would just make one of our sons, because he had way too much energy, just do laps around the house. Mm-hmm. And he actually did it because he was like, he saw it as a challenge. But the reason you want sports or activities for teenagers, particularly for boys, is they need both an outlet for their energy. They need to how to take this great new power they have and understand how to harness it
and put it at the service,
use it,
and put it at the service of others.
And yes. And that is the whole point of the teenage years for life in general, right? It's about they're practicing for adulthood and they're practicing under your roof. They're practicing within your auspices, right? And so you want to put them into activities, you want to put them in sports and even lessons on where you're now challenging them to get out of themselves.
See, this is the thing.
And to harness their power. Because again,
Right.
men and women at this point, they need to know that they have a power and that power can be used for good in this world.
This is the thing, and I hope that everyone sees the difference between these two stages of development. Under the age of 12, give your 10-year-old, give your 8-year-old time for unstructured play. Boundaries, they go and play at the park with other kids. You have kids over your house. Let them figure it out themselves, okay? But over the age of 12, this is when I think, especially when boys are in high school, they do need structured coach. They need coaches.
Yeah.
They need someone, they need to be in plays. They need to be taking lessons. They need to be learning from people outside of their family because they have to start learning about how the world works. I remember a priest saying to me, he said, in seminary, he's like, I could pick out the men who had played on sports teams and the men who did not.
Yeah.
Because the guys who played on sports teams had a greater facility
Yes.
to kind of work as a team with other guys, and they knew how to kind of speak their language.
Right.
Whereas the guys who really didn't have that same facility in relationships, in specifically relating to other men. And so I think that it is really important too, during this time, that even if your son isn't athletic, that boys learn how to do things that are admired by other boys.
Yeah.
So maybe they're not really athletic, but maybe they're a great artist, or maybe they're a great musician, or maybe they're really good at chess.
Yeah.
All of those things are really, really important. But the thing is that they have to do them in groups where they're learning, they have some kind of structure to learn how to relate. And that's going to carry them over in learning how to, operate as a team in the workforce, operate as a team for volunteerism or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think that all of those lessons need to be learned in a structured way outside of the family during the teenage years.
And I'm just going to, just kind of an overlay on the, that's all around this, right? One of the things we've talked about before is, kind of the rites of passage,
Yes.
And that in the preteen years, you're setting them up looking forward at the adventure that is the teen years, right? And there is something awesome and wonderful about this, right? Parents, you're letting your kids go, right? There's a detachment that happens, and a rite of passage, particularly for boys, is such that they get the idea that we're making a break from being a little boy to on the path to manhood. That doesn't mean you are a man, but it means that you are being gifted with some new powers, and that there is a community that you're now going to be entering.
Right.
And so we do that in our family with entering the company of men, for our young men coming up, that we, uncles and grandpa and, we now are looking at this young man and saying, we're calling you up to a higher place, and that there's a new community you're joining. And then when you think about this in light of activities, you're going, again, they may have been on teams before, but the stakes are now, the ante is up.
Yeah.
And you will have challenges. Like if your child isn't up for the challenge, he will be, or she will be challenged in some ways. And some of it is not always perfect, right? We're not saying that every activity is therefore perfectly designed for them.
Right.
But it does draw something out of our kids.
I
and
realize-
it draws them into something higher.
I realize that you saying this about like the rites of passage, that all of our boys, except for one, our two youngest boys and girl, were homeschooled up until junior high. And that was like a rite of passage. That's when they were 12, that's when they went to school, and that's when they all joined the school sports teams and they all started getting involved on that level.
That's right.
So it was definitely like, okay, we're very home based. We're very home based. You just need us. Okay, now we're sending you out.
That's right.
Because not everybody obviously is called to homeschool when our kids are younger, but I was just thinking about our own family. It's like, yeah, that kind of happened in that way. Right. And I do think that those sports that happen through schools or leagues that are either that junior high and definitely high school, that it does increase in training and in energy expended and all of that. So less in the junior high. And I do like the way that our school system does the junior high sports are not
Distinct.
super, they're competitive, they're training them, but it's not like 5 days a week. It's like 2 days a week. Because the emphasis for our school system is really on the high school sports. And I'm like, yes. I want my boys practicing football every day. Like I want them coming home exhausted. There was one, I think I said this on another podcast a long time ago, but there was one season, my son, Pat, who's now father of 4, freshman year, he didn't play, I think he didn't play soccer or something. He didn't play something, or maybe it was his 8th grade year. He didn't play anything. And he wasn't in any sports. And it was making me so nervous. I was like, he's going to do something stupid. He's going to get in trouble. And I was like, I remember saying to Mike, I'm like, I am never doing that again. Like I'm going to make him. He has to play a sport because he has to they have all that testosterone and everything. They got to get it out.
An outlet.
You know,
and think about obviously the boys and girls, but we have 6 daughters, right? And not every one of them was athletically, inclined.
Right.
But having those little activities, getting those organized things, whether again, and we've talked from the very beginning, there is something unique about sports for sure. It's right. It's body coordination, it's dexterity, it's skill, it's challenge, all of that.
Competitiveness, teamwork, controlling emotions, all of those things.
But we also had girls who went on and did dance or did theater, right?
Yes.
And
our daughters
music
are very
lessons,
involved in
right?
theater.
And so, and those are all right and rich experiences that are outside of just a classroom setting where they're growing in this. We know many friends whose kids have taken karate or they've done whatever. And it's like, it's about getting them engaged in a team of efforts where they are developing giftedness, because this is a key time for their gifts to be developed. This is when, whether it be physical, whether it be artistic, whether it be whatever, we're to be calling those out. Right? We're to be looking at their lives built on a strong foundation. Again, I'll just say this, that I really believe that in the early days, there's a deep sense that they belong here in our family in that first stage, right? And then they're slowly building out an independent or an identity of themselves, right? So they're building on that belonging, building a sense of identity. But then they're really in the teen years supposed to be going out kind of on mission, right? Their mission when they're in school is to be a student, but it's also to grow in their abilities. It's like this is their formation and training in a real way by getting out into the community. And those are natural flowing from each other.
And what I think is another interesting way this prepares them for adulthood is when they have their own schedule.
Yes.
They have their own sports schedule.
Level
they have their own game schedule. And so they have to learn, and this is where parents, you're coming in as a mentor to help recognize they need time to rest. They need time to study. They need time with their family, and they need time to, have all of their sports activities and things like that. So while they're under your roof, teach them time management, right? Teach them, okay, I actually just this morning, I was talking to one of my teenage sons, and he was waiting to go to work, and he was wasting time basically. And I was like, hey, you use this time to write these thank you cards, like do these things after your graduation that needs to get done. And so I'm like, this is the time that you have to do that. You're not gonna have this time later. You have the time now. And so left to his own devices, he wouldn't think that because he's still in training.
Yes.
But that's what we as parents have to do in those small ways, but then overall help them to manage their time. And this is where you're slowly giving them that independence. And I just want to say, moms and dads, of your high schooler, you should not be in charge of knowing when their games are, where they have to be, what time practices are. I'll be honest with you. I don't know any of that. For my teens, I don't know anything. It's now the coaches send the schedule, and I do sometimes manage to put it on my own calendar, but it is my kids' responsibility to say, hey, I need a ride here. This is where I'm supposed to be That is their responsibility.
And I really think that's one of the blessings of a larger family, because we can't manage it. So therefore, they have to do it, which teaches them independence and the consequences early on, right? And for those who have 1 or 2 kids, be cautious about this, about managing.
This is why God didn't give me 1 or 2 kids. I would have been so controlling.
But it's still a great skill for them to learn how to master that. Yes, you can be aware. Yes, you should be aware. That's great.
Right.
However, let this be an opportunity to slowly empower them to manage their own time, because getting them to a place where they can manage not their physical power and strength, but their time.
Right.
They will be great. They will thank you for years to come that you have given them that opportunity to practice and fail and learn and grow. And you can be there throughout all of this. But it really is so key that your teen, we said this already, but your teen needs to grow and form outside the family. They need to be tethered. They need to be tied back with many great family culture traditions and rituals, if you will, and habits of the home. But this is where you need to intentionally allow them to go and do their thing.
Okay, so now let's talk about the adults that are
in the life of your child,
stepping into the life of your
in
child.
locus parentis or whatever.
The adults who are stepping into the life of your child, whether those be teachers, instructors, coaches, whatever. And I think that there is, again, the whole idea of we can't make the world safe for our kids, but we can make our kids strong. Okay. So we have had amazing coaches, and we're going to give an example too. Amazing coaches, teachers, instructors, 100%, people who have loved our children so well. And we've had some real duds.
Yeah. Some that were just like, and then others that were like, no.
Others that were like, I actually need to keep my child away from you. You are not a healthy person for my kid to be around. Yeah. So,
because in days gone by, people would drop off their kids, whether it be at school or whether it be at a practice or whatever, and just walk away and trust that was it. We should never do that.
What do you mean? Go ahead.
We should be at a place as parents that we're aware of the coach. I mean, we're not talking about, I'm not talking about
going to your high schoolers' football practices. No,
zero. I mean, we do drop our kids off, but we have to know the coach. We have to know the instructor. We have to have a basic sense of where they're going in this. And does it require of us something? It does.
So when we say know them, I don't mean like, hey, I need to have everybody who coaches my kids over for dinner or whatever.
Not,
no, but I do think that there has to be, they have to see your face, talk to them and also have an ongoing dialogue with your child about what is happening.
And that's probably more key.
What is happening. And so I'll just give an example with one of my daughters. I was thinking I have another example too from like an instructor as well so one of my daughters was taking dance lessons at the time, and she would come back home and she would be complaining about this dance instructor, saying that, she said, I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb, and this is blah, 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 blah. And saying things that were derogatory towards my daughter. Now, if my daughter was 8 years old, we'd be done. I'd be like, this is not worth it. Or I'd go in and watch the class or whatever. This daughter was not 8 years old. She was a strong young woman. And this is why I think those stages of development are so, so very important. Right. And I hope everybody who's listening hears that. This daughter, in knowing her and knowing her personality, I really felt like this is a good learning experience for her.
Right.
And I said,
stretch.
Basically I said, you know what? Not everybody is nice. Some people are simply not really great teachers. Some people act like this. Some people don't know how to treat other people. You are going to meet people in your life like that. Suck it up. I'm sorry.
Well, and we taught her how to deal with it, right?
Yeah, and actually it did come to a point once she came home crying, and then I did go in and talk to the instructor. Right. And I just was like, this is not okay. My daughter doesn't feel welcome in this class, and I would like to see that changed.
You don't want to get on her bad side.
So I was very calm, and I prayed on the way there, just Lord, help me to be a good witness to you, But I did feel that it had gone a little bit too far.
That's right.
And And she finished the whole class and it was fine. And I don't think this instructor is her favorite person and never will be. And I think that instructor needs to learn how to instruct young people.
Better, right?
But that is not my responsibility to teach the person that. But it is my responsibility to my daughter. And I do think she is going to be stronger for it.
Yeah.
Because the emphasis wasn't, this class is not who you are. For my daughter, our daughter, this class is not who you are. Your success in this class does not determine your self-worth. This is just something that you're doing.
That's right.
And you're going to run into people that are sometimes going to say things that are mean. And you're going to be okay. And you can walk away from that unscathed emotionally. And she and I talked about it. But I guess my point is that you as a parent need to know your child. Yeah. You need to know your child, and you also need to hold these activities loosely. Because if I was like, you are a dancer, this is everything, your self-worth, or communicating that your self-worth depends on this, and then when that instructor is talking to her and saying like, you're messing this up, blah, 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 my daughter's going to take that in to be part of her identity. But that's not, she knew. I was like, hey, babe, we're just doing this for fun. And I don't want you to quit. I really want to see you finish this. And I believe you can because I believe in you.
Right. And that experience and others with our kids throughout, coaches and other things, right, gave us the opportunity to speak into the heart of our child, to help teach them resilience, teach them perseverance, teaching them how to not give up, to stick to it, right? And also while also dealing with those emotions and learning strategies and say, okay, well, let's just see. One, does anyone have a right to speak to you that way? No. Are you a bit like just talking up? Because I want to make sure those words, those things that are said don't settle in her heart, don't settle in their heart, right? And so that as an adult, as their parent, as their loved one, who they've had a formed sense of, I know I belong here. I'm safe here with mom and dad and identity. But then it gave us that opportunity. So again, this getting involved with sports, it helps shape them. And that doesn't mean it's always in the pristine and all beautiful ways. There are some challenges that come with this.
Oh yeah. But I've seen coaches like scream at my boys and it's just like,
and we help
older,
them,
who are teenagers,
and we help them walk through it. Now we don't hold their hand. We don't always intervene. Now again, if there's like we've talked about, there are some situations where we do have to intervene, but we try to, in general, back up the teacher, back up the coach, back up the instructor, so that our kids learn this, or at least to them, or at least to our kids, that's what we do.
Right.
We may talk to that coach or whatever and say, hey, look,
if needed, what's going on here? Yeah. And I do want to say, even in that situation with that dance instructor, I did ask my daughter, what were you doing?
That's right.
That she spoke to you in that way. And were you listening? Were you doing the right thing?
Right.
You know what?
Own your stuff.
100%. And saying, look, if you were being disrespectful to her because you weren't listening and she overreacted, okay, yes, that's on her. But you know what? You need to make sure that you are doing the right thing.
Yes.
And if she's yelling at you for blah, blah, you know what? Then you need to practice more. And let's try to get it right. And yes, you don't deserve to be spoken to that way, but you are going to meet people in your life who are going to speak like that. And you can't just wither up and die.
And you still have to do the right thing.
And you still have to do the right thing. Absolutely.
But there is a point where we have found where you get to this juncture where you're like, okay,
this is an irreconcilable difference.
Or for a young child, right? For it's like, hey, we're doing this for fun. If it's adding this level of stress and burden to your kid and it's meant for fun and they're not an older teen who is learning kind of some powerful, important lessons, there is a line where you just say, hey, you know what?
It's not worth it. I just want to give another example with a different daughter. There was another time when we had a daughter in an activity and she came back and was saying, the coach is saying this, whatever. And I went and spoke to the coach. And it was a train wreck. The coach went like kind of ballistic on me. And then I was like, yeah, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Like,
it was easy. It made the decision easier though.
And I have to say that of all of our 10 children and all of the different activities, I've only had that happen once. When I went to speak to the adult in charge, almost always the adult in charge, maybe they don't react perfectly like that dance instructor, whatever. But I've never I had one time they were like, it was like unbalanced. And I was like, we're not doing this. And that was a situation that I came home and told Mike, and he was like, this is not worth it at all. And she was young too, younger, not a
Correct.
teenager.
Correct.
So there, of course, I'm kind of against saying blanket statements like you're never allowed to quit anything, because that's really not true. Because if there is situations like that where you're like, this person is clearly unbalanced,
Right.
Not only is my child quitting, but I'm pulling them out because this is not safe.
And that's common sense, right?
Exactly, that's
this
common
is
sense.
why we as parents get paid the big bucks. We have to make those hard calls, right?
Right.
Because I remember for a long time, I would say to the kids as they were doing something, Hernans don't quit. Like maybe you have something like that you, hey, we stick to it.
One of our sons was in a play, and like a month into it, he was like, I don't want to do this anymore, and we were like, nope. You're doing it.
That's right.
And I actually did texted like 2 or 3 other moms. I'm like, he wants to quit. Are you going to make your son saying it? And they're like, yes. I'm like, okay, we're going to band together.
Yes. And actually, I think that's really important, right?
Yes, it is.
Because our kids need it, but they also need the encouragement and the environment to make it easy to do the right thing,
Absolutely.
right? And just because things are hard, we don't want them to walk away.
Yeah.
But if they are emotionally or obviously physically, but if anything's unsafe, if there's a place where it's like, you know what, this is, and by that, I mean, a little bit of stress is not a bad thing. Being a little bit busy is not a bad thing.
But like that instance with that person who was like clearly unbalanced, even when we were in private, two adults talking, I was
healthy.
like,
So
this is not a safe person.
And that's why it's so key that we have a very clear understanding of boundaries. Because again, as parents, we're not saying, here's the checklist, check, you did it all, right? It's knowing your child, because one child might look at it and flourish in that environment.
Yeah.
And another might be stressed out, burdened, feeling guilty, feeling shame.
Yeah.
And so you do have to have this ongoing dialogue with spouses, because you might look at this, and this is the other real part of this, is that as spouses, you may have 2 very different perspectives on what's going on.
Absolutely.
And what you want to drive
especially
towards.
moms and dads in regards to teenage boys. Moms and dads have sometimes can be on really different pages.
And this isn't a hard and fast rule, but moms in general, lean on your husband when we're talking about
instincts.
teenage boys.
Yes.
That doesn't mean he's
Agreed.
always right. That doesn't mean we have an infused knowledge.
But he has been a teenage boy and you haven't.
And there is something, because there are things that happen among teenage boys that is an important part of character formation that happens that might be disquieting and might appear to be risky to some moms. Again, there's a balance. There's always a balance.
We've definitely had boys have coaches who they are. I could just see the boys not thriving. They were just not thriving for whatever reason, and they kind of stuck it out, but it just, and it's like one of those things that I remember us talking about it. And when it came time, are we going to do this again? We're going to stick it out for the next couple weeks of the season.
Finish it up, right.
But you know what? I'm not going to encourage them to do this again.
It's not worth probably.
No, it's really not worth it.
And on that, just recognizing that as parents, we say this a lot, but we don't want to repeat our childhood in our kids' lives. You want to be in tune and in touch with how you reacted or how your experience growing up. Yeah. Because it might
you don't want to be triggered.
Play out in your kids' lives, maybe more like you either wanted it to or were wounded from your past. You need to be able to own what happened to you in such a way that you're freely allowing your children to experience their own thing. Because if you have more than one child, chances are they're not going to be exactly like you.
Yeah.
And therefore allow them to experience things on their way and help see from their vantage point, as opposed to imposing your complete knowledge.
Yeah, like maybe you were a soccer star, or maybe you were the dads, maybe you were a great football player, and maybe your son's just not that great, or it's not his thing, or he likes to play, but he's not really passionate about it. Right. Just recognize that's okay.
And early on in your kids' lives, them doing things that you enjoy doing is very right and appropriate. You teach them what you love, and there's something beautiful about that. But when they hit the teen years, you need to step back on some level and allow them as an individual to rise up. and not just who you said that they were. I remember having a friend, and we've talked about this before, who said things like, my son wanted to do skateboarding, and he was doing it with this group, and it was totally unstructured, right? But he had an image of what a skateboarder was when he was growing up. And we don't want to impose that.
He was like, I didn't want my boy to be a skateboarder, not because there's anything wrong with what he was doing,
right,
but because of my preconceived ideas.
Right. And so we just have to
let go
know
of
that and own that, so that we can be free to parent and gift our kids with their own experience, their own value of growing up in this way.
Really do just want to give a shout out to all of those adults who are listening, parents who are listening, who are coaches for kids, because I know that there's a lot of parents. I mean, I look at the people who step up to coach in our schools and in our local community.
Yeah.
And I just am so grateful for them.
I'm humbled.
I am so grateful because so many of these coaches, they get paid hardly nothing. They deal with all kinds of drama from parents and kids and everything. And they do it for the love of the sport. They do it for the love of the kids themselves.
That's right.
I'm telling you, they're not doing it for the money, guys.
That's right.
They're not doing it for the glamour. They're not. And our son right now, so our football coach at Catholic Central in Steubenville is just such a great man. And I have to say that he holds a high standard for these boys. Like, he's called me about one of my kids, and it's like, I don't think he's telling me the truth. What's going on here? He said he's not coming to practice because of this. Like, what's happening? And we had that conversation, and he's focused not just on success on the football field, but recognizes that these young men need to be men of character. They need to be men of integrity, for them to work cohesively as a team and to work together. And he asks that, like, during the month of August, he was like, please don't go on vacation. Please, 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 please don't go on vacation.
June and July, go for it.
He was like, June and July, go for it, because they're practicing all summer. But the thing is that,
and at first, that really bothered me at first, because I'm like, hey, he's still in summer vacation.
Yeah.
But I'm like, all right, now I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. He's building a team. And
he's also flexible enough to, like, recognize, hey, go on vacation June and July. But last year, we had scheduled Jimmy to go to this Camp Damascus, where a bunch of our kids are right now, actually, to go to Camp Damascus. And he would be there like August 1st and 2nd, something like that. And that's like August 1st was like
the
football,
deadline.
100%, So, and coach just called us. He was like, Jimmy told me he's not going to be here. He was just like, please don't do this to me. He was like, because if he doesn't, my rule is that he has to sit out one half of the game or something for every practice
day,
missed. And that means I'm going to have to bench him for one whole game if he is not there these 2 days of practice. And he was like, because this is what I have to do. Right. And we actually wound up switching. And we were like, okay, I respect.
And we made it work.
And we talked to Jimmy. And so we just made it work.
And we switched. He switched when he went to.
Yeah, he switched. He went to Damascus a different week, not with his friends, but with a random group of people. And Jimmy could handle that. He was fine. But I remember the coach texting me, he said, praise God. Thank you so much, for supporting our team and all of that. So that's the kind of guy that you want. Somebody who is flexible, but also
holds a high standard. And he does it not just on the athletic field, which is great. Like, he makes them go through all the blocking and tackling drills. He goes through all the plays. He goes through a ton of stuff. But he does require, as you said, character, service, right? Yeah. Fidelity, faith. I mean, he makes it part of the training and the formation that happens for the young men. And he is in regular contact with the parents, right?
Yes.
Like, I feel heard, seen, known by him.
Yeah.
I feel like any of the questions and issues we've had have been received with respect. He pushes back on, rightly when he's like, well, this is what we need to do to keep a cohesive team together. Yeah. And I trust him.
Yeah.
I trust him, and he has certain demands. Like, when he's like, I will not tolerate foul language or this or that, whether it be the coaches or whether it be the students, they all need to have this. I mean, he just sets that stage, which I'm like, that's what I want. I want that kind of man. I want that kind of coach in my kid's life. That's when I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
This is what we want. And now you may not have be as fortunate as us, but I bet you there's a coach in your area. And I bet
but we've been through a lot of other bad coaches too.
Yes. But I bet you anything, you showing a level of appreciation, not just in word, but in deed, meaning you show that you support them, goes a mile, because you know what? Those people have had a massive impact on the life of our kids.
Absolutely.
And we need them. We cannot, and we're not supposed to do this on their own. You know, we talk a lot about the power of mom and dad, the irreplaceable role, and that is absolute and that is true. But we weren't meant to do this on our own either. We need those coaches. We need those men and women who come into the lives of our kids.
Okay, I don't think we should do the key takeaways and couple discussion,
we're a little
because we
bit
are
over
like
time.
way over time.
Yeah.
So
All right.
let's just go ahead and say a quick prayer, and you read the show notes, guys.
So check the show notes. We have some key takeaways just as a reminder of what we talked about. If you haven't noticed, on your podcast app, they actually have an auto-generated transcript so you can read through some things as you wanted to. And we also have some couple discussion questions.
And if you are a member and you're listening to this and you want to discuss this more on the member site, please go on and do that. If you want to become a member and join the member site and join that discussion, we would love to have you.
Yeah. All right, so let's pray. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, Lord, you are good and you are gracious. You are the creator of our children and our lives. Lord, we ask for your intercession to help us both be wise and discerning, as well as charitable and courageous in our parenting, that we might allow our kids to play, allow our kids to have the formation through the right kind of activities for their hearts and their minds and their bodies. We give you our kids. We ask you, Lord, to intervene and help us in our work, empower our parenting so we might embrace this call you've given us. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, if you want to find out more of this, messyfamilyproject.org. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.